For many years, Lisa Bonet was viewed as an emblem of quiet enigma, a presence that hovered just beyond Hollywood's chaos while subtly influencing it from within. After her separation from Jason Momoa, however, a change became evident. It wasn't loud or theatrical, but it ran deep. Those closest to her sensed it first, followed by industry insiders, and eventually the public. This was not a narrative about a woman falling apart after a breakup, but about someone letting go of a life that no longer fit. The shift unsettled people far more than anyone anticipated. A life never meant for the spotlight. Lisa Bonet's journey began well before fame, yet it is impossible to untangle who she is from the moment she appeared in America's living rooms as a teenager. Born in San Francisco and raised in Los Angeles, she grew up in an affluent, largely white neighborhood where she often felt out of place. After her parents' divorce, she became an only child, later acknowledging that loneliness deeply shaped her identity. She never felt rooted in a single world, and that feeling of displacement followed her into adulthood. Her entry into acting was almost accidental. A friend encouraged her to attend an acting class, and for the first time, Lisa felt she had discovered a space where being different was not a flaw. That experience led to a guest appearance on St. Elsewhere while she was still in school, followed by an audition that would change her life. At just 16 years old, she was cast as Denise Huxtable. Suddenly, she became part of one of the most influential black families ever portrayed on television. As The Cosby Show grew into a cultural phenomenon, Lisa matured under public scrutiny. The series dominated television ratings, and Denise Huxtable emerged as both a fashion icon and a symbol of youthful self-assurance. Yet despite the security and success the show provided, Lisa never appeared fully at ease with fame. Producers noticed this early on. Marcy Carsey later reflected that Lisa seemed destined to remain entirely herself, regardless of how large her platform became. That instinct would shape her entire career. While many young actors embraced the safety of television stardom, Lisa quietly resisted being confined to a single image. By the time she reached adulthood, she was already seeking ways to move beyond expectations. That search soon placed her in direct opposition to the wholesome persona America had projected onto her name, resulting in a rupture that came at a cost. By the time Lisa Bonet turned 18, the divide between who she truly was and who the public believed her to be had grown impossible to ignore. Though she continued portraying the reliable older sister on a family sitcom, inwardly she felt restless. Fame had come too early, too easily, and too neatly. She understood the unspoken rule of television: once an actor becomes a symbol, breaking free from it can threaten everything. That understanding led her to a decision that permanently reshaped her relationship with Hollywood. She chose to star in Angel Heart, a dark and adult film that stood in stark contrast to the image of Denise Huxtable. The role was explicit, psychologically intense, and unapologetically sexual. Upon its release, the backlash was swift and severe. The film's rating was altered after its initial cut, and media attention fixated less on the story and more on Lisa's body and the perceived violation of America's expectations. Lisa, however, never described the choice as an act of rebellion. In interviews, she explained that television actors were rarely taken seriously in film and that she felt a responsibility to her own growth rather than to a fictional character's legacy. When critics accused her of damaging Denise Huxtable's image, she responded without apology. She emphasized that her loyalty was to herself, her independence, and her craft. That resolve shocked an industry accustomed to obedience, particularly from young women. The repercussions followed quickly. Around the same time, Lisa was positioned to lead A Different World, a spin-off centered on her character. Though the show debuted successfully, tension simmered behind the scenes. When Lisa became pregnant, it exposed a deeper clash of values. Producers debated incorporating her pregnancy into the storyline as a reflection of real life and female agency. Ultimately, the decision was uncompromising. The character was not allowed to grow alongside the woman portraying her. As a result, Lisa stepped away from the series she had helped inspire. Public narratives painted her departure as troublesome, but those close to the production later defended her, pointing to her youth and the immense pressure she faced. At just 20 years old, Lisa Bonet found herself scrutinized not only for her artistic decisions, but for her body, her motherhood, and her refusal to conform. This era marked a decisive shift. Hollywood began to label her unpredictable. Lisa began to see Hollywood as conditional. Once that realization took hold, there was no return. Motherhood, separation, and a quiet retreat. Motherhood did not enter Lisa Bonet's life as a secondary plot, it arrived as a complete realignment. With the birth of her daughter Zoe, her priorities changed in ways Hollywood neither expected nor supported. Her career slowed, not due to uncertainty or failure, but by choice. During interviews from that time, Lisa spoke candidly about stepping back from work to focus on her child and to understand who she was becoming beyond fame. Her marriage to Lenny Kravitz began with passion and mutual admiration, yet unfolded under constant public scrutiny. When the relationship ended, the separation carried deep emotional weight for both. Lenny later described that period as one marked by pain and exhaustion. As Lisa reorganized her life around steadiness rather than spectacle, she moved with her daughter to Topanga Canyon, a deliberate withdrawal from Hollywood's machinery. There, she raised Zoe surrounded by nature, animals, and distance from cameras. During this period, Lisa made a symbolic choice few celebrities would attempt. She legally changed her name to Lila Koimun, explaining that she wanted a name that honored her private self rather than her public image. This was not a publicity stunt. It was a deliberate separation between the woman she was becoming and the identity the industry refused to release. Professionally, the period was often mistaken for disappearance. In truth, Lisa was recalibrating. She spoke about yoga, self-reflection, and alternative ways of living, not as trends, but as necessities. She did not abandon acting, she rejected the belief that her value depended on constant visibility. When Zoe later chose to live with her father for a time, Lisa supported the decision despite the emotional difficulty it brought. It reflected a recurring pattern in her life, choosing what felt right over what felt safe. Hollywood moved on quickly, filling the void with new faces. Lisa did not pursue relevance. And yet, when she eventually returned to acting, it was entirely on her own terms, carrying a depth that only distance can create. The woman who resurfaced was no longer the teenage icon America remembered. She was quieter, more grounded, and less inclined to explain herself. That restraint would shape the next phase of her life, including the love story many believed had finally rooted her. Jason Momoa, Love, and the Illusion of a Perfect Union. When Lisa Bonet first crossed paths with Jason Momoa, it didn't feel momentous or destined for headlines. The encounter was quiet, intimate, almost coincidental. They met in a Los Angeles jazz club, years before Momoa became a household name and long before blockbuster films and global fame reshaped his life. At the time, he was young, largely unknown, and visibly nervous in her presence. Lisa, on the other hand, had already experienced the highs and costs of fame and had learned how to retreat from it. The difference between them wasn't about control or influence, it was about timing. Their bond developed slowly and without spectacle. Unlike Lisa's earlier relationships, this one grew away from constant public scrutiny. She was drawn to Momoa's emotional openness and sincerity, while he found comfort in her calm and steadiness. He later confessed that he had admired her since childhood, but what kept him grounded beside her as an adult wasn't nostalgia. It was a feeling of safety. Lisa had created a life centered on honesty, routine, and home, and for a while, that life naturally made room for him. Together, they formed a blended family that many admired from the outside. Lisa maintained a respectful, cooperative relationship with Lenny Kravitz, and Momoa joined that family dynamic seamlessly. Their children grew up with continuity instead of division. During this time, Lisa spoke about feeling supported and protected in ways she hadn't experienced before. For someone who had fiercely guarded her independence for years, that sense of security held deep significance. Marriage came later, after years of partnership, and it was intentionally understated. There were no grand proclamations about destiny or forever. Instead, they spoke about shared values, growth, and mutual respect. To observers, it seemed Lisa had finally struck a balance between intimacy and autonomy. Yet stability can quietly shift beneath the surface. As Momoa's career gained speed, his life became defined by travel, extended filming schedules, and constant change. Months away from home became normal. Public attention intensified. The momentum that once energized him began to clash with the stillness Lisa had spent decades cultivating. Their separation wasn't driven by arguments or scandal, but by divergence. Lisa didn't want to pursue endless movement. She wanted to preserve the life she had built. Eventually, those differences could no longer be reconciled. By the time they announced their separation, the emotional decision had already been lived through privately. The public statement came long after the internal work was done. There were no public accusations or dramatic fallout, only a quiet acknowledgement that their shared life no longer fit them both. For Lisa Bonet, this moment marked the start of a transformation many would later misunderstand. After the separation came stillness, withdrawal, and a subtler form of strength. When the news became public, many expected a familiar response, a reinvention campaign, a visible makeover, or a carefully crafted statement. None of that followed. Instead, Lisa did what she had always done throughout her life: she stepped back. Not as an act of defeat, but as an act of alignment with her true self. Court records later revealed that the emotional separation had occurred long before the announcement, underscoring intention rather than impulse. While headlines framed the split as abrupt, Lisa had already been quietly adjusting her life. Friends described her as lighter, more centered, and more intentional. There was no rush to fill the void, no need to replace what was lost. Public appearances became even rarer. Acting no longer held urgency. Her last credited roles were years behind her, and she felt no pressure to return. Financial independence gave her freedom, and emotionally, she felt no pull. For Lisa, work had never defined her worth, it was simply a form of expression, meaningful only when it felt true. What began to draw attention wasn't her activity, but her presence. At an age when Hollywood expects visible effort and constant upkeep, Lisa appeared unchanged, not sculpted, not altered, just fully present. Speculation followed, but she had already addressed those questions long ago. Her routine remained simple: natural skincare, minimal makeup, consistency over correction. She spoke openly about coconut oil, avoiding excess products, and allowing the body to exist naturally. Yet her real transformation wasn't physical, it was behavioral. She stayed away from social media. She avoided public commentary. Her time was spent with her children, extended family, and close circle. Her days were shaped by rhythm rather than reaction: yoga, movement, writing, and time outdoors. These weren't new practices, but the continuation of a life she had been quietly nurturing for decades. In a culture obsessed with visible reinvention, Lisa Bonet's refusal to perform healing unsettled people. She challenged the belief that growth must be displayed to be real. In choosing restraint over spectacle, she reclaimed something more powerful than relevance. What truly unsettles Hollywood about Lisa Bonet's transformation isn't mystery, it's clarity. She didn't emerge from her marriage seeking validation or rewriting her image. She simply became more herself. That kind of outcome resists easy narratives, especially in an industry uncomfortable with women aging on their own terms. At a stage when many actresses feel compelled to explain their faces, their choices, or their absence, Lisa offered no explanations. She continued to prioritize movement, African dance, yoga, and routines that kept her connected to her body rather than in conflict with it. She rejected the concept of anti-aging altogether. Her philosophy centered on care instead of control, maintenance instead of correction. This mindset echoed through her family. When her daughter faced invasive speculation about cosmetic procedures, the response was immediate and genuine, not polished, not defensive, just honest. The message was consistent: the body is not a public project. What some interpret as disappearance is, in truth, completion. Lisa Bonet had already achieved fame, influence, and legacy early in life. What remained was the quieter, more difficult work of living in alignment without applause. Her separation from Jason Momoa didn't create her transformation, it revealed it. It removed the final structure that required compromise with a pace she no longer wanted. She didn't leave Hollywood in bitterness. She outgrew it. She didn't reject love. She redefined it. And she didn't become invisible. She became unreachable to narratives that needed her to be someone else. That's why her transformation unsettles people. It offers no spectacle, only reflection. Do you see Lisa Bonet's journey as a gentle evolution or a rejection of Hollywood's expectations? And do you believe stepping away can be more powerful than staying visible? If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for what others overlook.